He didn't even shake my hand. Just strutted into the Monday executive sink like he'd been born in that corner office with his name already on the frosted glass. Declan Worthington, 34, hair gelled within an inch of its life, a wristwatch that cost more than my first car, and a grin like he'd just bought the place with daddy's poker winnings. "Good morning, everyone," he said, like he hadn't just replaced a man who'd built this company from a glorified Excel macro into a tech platform valued north of 9 figures. They introduced him as the new visionary CTO, which was rich, considering the last guy left mid-heart attack and mid-contract dispute. But Declan didn't care about that. He was already pulling up slides about disruptive agility and flattening engineering silos. I watched from my seat 3 chairs down, silently noting how he'd spelled architecture wrong in his opening deck, twice. 2 years ago, I'd have called that out. Now, I just leaned back and listened, because I already knew how this story went. The second his resume mentioned a TED Talk and not a single compiled product, I knew I was about to be streamlined. You can always tell the ones who come in talking velocity instead of uptime. And sure enough, by Thursday, half the code leads reported to someone named Tyson, whose GitHub activity was mostly AI-generated haikus and empty repos with names like Quantum Shredder. The shift was fast, precise, surgical even, like watching a raccoon try to disassemble a VCR with a butter knife. And hey, if you've made it this far, do us a favor and hit subscribe. 97% of listeners don't, and it helps the team more than you know. Keeps the coffee flowing and the servers from setting themselves on fire. Back to Declan. He started streamlining the second week. My admin credentials were downgraded without so much as a heads up. No one spoke to me about it. No ticket, no audit trail. One day I could access the ops panel. The next I was locked out like some temp who forgot to return a badge. Did I rage? Throw a mug? Nope. I just sent a polite IT request for clarification, then quietly opened my private archive folder and pulled out a PDF I hadn't looked at in years. My original employment contract. Scanned copy. Wet signature. Back when HR still used fax machines and thought NDAs were a formality. Clause 10.7 B. Sat quietly on page 9 like a loaded gun under floorboards. I didn't read it yet, just kept it close. By week 3, I wasn't invited to product stand-ups. They accidentally left me off the roadmap all hands. At the Friday lunch, Declan leaned over my shoulder and actually said, "You must be the legacy person." Legacy. That's what they call old code. And apparently old employees. I smiled. Yup, I'm the one who wrote the legacy that keeps your platform breathing. He laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. Funny thing about tech. It forgets fast. People chase shiny frameworks and think the bones don't matter. But every dashboard, every license check, every alert system screaming at 3 a.m. when an API hiccups, I built it. Quietly. Without drama. 7 years of patching, scaling, optimizing. I wrote the heartbeat this company runs on. And Declan? He didn't even know where the server logs were stored. But it wasn't about competence. It was about narrative. He was young, loud, marketable. I was invisible. That was my superpower once. Now it was my expiration date. Still, I didn't flinch. Let him believe what he wanted. Let him plug in his friends, rename the folders, delete the changelogs. I said nothing when he cut my conference speaking slot and gave it to a junior dev with a Twitch stream. I said nothing when he removed me from the architecture repo and posted a Slack message saying we were modernizing our approach. Let him. Because every time he moved a piece, I saw the next 3 moves ahead. And when someone plays checkers on a chessboard, the end isn't noise. It's silence. And I've always preferred quiet. The calendar invite hit at 6:42 a.m. subject line. Transition planning optional. No sender name, just on behalf of Declan Worthington. No agenda, no attachments, just a time, a room number, and the subtle scent of condescension. I clicked accept, then sat there for 5 minutes staring at the blinking cursor in the reply field. Should I ask what it was about? Pretend I didn't know? Request context? I closed the window. If they wanted a performance, I'd give them one, but not on their script. By now, most of my meetings had been mysteriously reevaluated. The compliance sync? Cancelled. The engineering design review? Moved to a leaner structure. My architecture reports, usually met with 3 follow-up emails and an emergency call from ops, were suddenly met with radio silence. It was like watching my own professional obituary get published, line by passive-aggressive line. And Declan? He was thriving, stomping through the office like a televangelist with a Wi-Fi signal. Every day came with a new Slack post about radical code-based reinvention or cleaning up the tech debt from the legacy era. Legacy. Always that word. He wielded it like a weapon, 4 syllables of erasure. He'd started importing his own team. Fresh-faced engineers with resumes that read like startup Mad Libs, built a blockchain-enabled fridge inventory tool. Former lead at a unicorn that IPO'd into dust. They nodded at everything he said like cult members who thought Kubernetes was a spirit animal. At one of the few remaining meetings I was still invited to, he stood in front of a whiteboard and said, "We're going to completely rewrite the core. This stuff is duct-taped spaghetti." He was pointing at my architecture diagram, the one that had held 99.98% uptime through 4 scaling phases and 2 acquisition audits. Cleared my throat. That spaghetti just passed its 3rd SOC 2 compliance review. He grinned. Yeah, but imagine if it didn't need to. That's when I knew. He didn't care about building. He cared about ownership. See, there's a breed of leader who thinks you can whiteboard your way past reality. That product is aesthetics. That functionality bends to confidence. And that replacing the foundation is as easy as renaming the GitHub repo and throwing around words like containerization and zero trust. So I let him build his castle of foam bricks, and I quietly went digging, buried deep in our old company archive system, one that hadn't been migrated to his shiny new cloud stack. I found it, my original contract, tucked inside a zip folder labeled Legacy Contracts. It was still a scanned PDF, complete with the old letterhead logo and my ink-smudged signature. I remembered signing it in HR's broom closet office while someone was microwaving fish. Clause 10.7, B. Intellectual property reversion. If terminated without 90 days written notice, all original software, frameworks, and architectures created by the employee would legally revert to their ownership upon departure. My hands didn't shake. I didn't smile. I just closed the file, encrypted a copy to my personal drive, and logged off for the day. Declan kept doing his little parade, swapping out tools, canceling licenses he didn't understand, bragging to investors about how lean the new team would be once he finished, gutting the obsolete bloat. I kept my meetings quiet, kept my notes cleaner, and I kept my mouth shut, because they hadn't just forgotten to include me. They'd forgotten who built the thing they were standing on. And they were about to learn what happens when you pull out the beams thinking they're just decoration. He called it a quick sync. Booked for 20 minutes on a Tuesday right before lunch, because of course he did. I walked in to find Declan already seated, legs crossed, sipping something green from a bottle with more vowels than ingredients. He didn't look up when I entered, just tapped his Apple Pencil against the desk like he was bored for me. "Hey," he said, finally glancing up. "Let's keep this casual." Translation: "You're about to get screwed, and I want to enjoy every second." He tapped a few times on his tablet, then turned the screen toward me with a faux apologetic shrug. "We're pivoting some things. Streamlining. You know how it is." I said nothing, just waited. He leaned back, locked his fingers behind his head. "So we're ending your role effective immediately. No hard feelings, just not the direction we're taking things." I looked at him. No blink. No sigh. "You're terminating me?" He grinned. "Come on, let's not make it weird. Look, everything you created, it all stays here. It's company property now. That's just how this works." He actually laughed after he said it, like it was a punchline. I tilted my head slightly. "Can I get that in writing?" He waved a hand. Yeah, standard stuff. But we're not doing severance, it's not personal. Just streamlining, right? Streamlining." This smug little tech frat boy, who'd been here less time than my desk chair, was telling me the company that I helped build from the ground up owes me nothing. Like I hadn't stayed through 2 funding rounds, 3 pivots, and 1 Christmas Eve infrastructure collapse. Like I hadn't pulled 30-hour shifts tuning the licensing engine so our clients wouldn't sue us into oblivion. Like I hadn't mentored half the damn engineering team he just fired and replaced with LinkedIn influencers in Patagonia vests. He thought this was the end of the conversation. He thought I'd plead, argue, rage. I just nodded. Okay, I said, calm. Even. He seemed thrown by that. Probably expected tears or at least a snarky comment. But I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. I just grabbed my thermos, the small plant I kept by the window, and my backup drive. Didn't even ask for a box. At the door, I paused, turned just enough to let him see my face. My voice steady like I was reading a grocery list. Send me the final paperwork. I want it all documented. Every sentence. His grin flickered. I mean, legal's going to handle it. Exactly, I said. Let them. I walked out. No drama. No slamming. Just the rhythmic click of my boots against the hallway tile. Same ones I'd worn on launch day when the system went live and our first 7-figure contract landed. By the time I got to the elevator, I had the contract file open on my phone. Clause 10.7b. My thumb hovered over it like a trigger. Everything I created, it wasn't theirs. And they just signed the receipt proving it. We met at a diner out near the county line. One of those places with cracked leather booths and a waitress who calls everyone sweetheart, whether they're 8 or 80. I slid into the seat across from Miles, my oldest friend and the only attorney I trust not to screw things up just to make a point. He had his briefcase open before I even finished setting down my coffee. You brought it? He asked, no small talk. I pulled out the folded printout and laid it on the table like a relic. My original offer letter, signed during a time when the company still ran payroll manually and HR kept onboarding docs in manila folders inside a fireproof cabinet. He smoothed it out with both hands, eyes scanning like a bloodhound. And then he saw it. Clause 10.7b, he muttered, tapping the text with a half-bitten thumbnail. Jesus Christ, you weren't kidding. Still valid? I asked. Not just valid, he said. It's a goddamn guillotine. The clause was simple, tucked between outdated stock vesting schedules and a hilariously low base salary. It stated that any original software, systems, or architectures I built while employed would revert to me, fully and automatically, if I were terminated without at least 90 days written notice. No severance? No problem. I didn't need it. Declan had given me 36 hours. This thing's like a landmine with a timer, Miles said, eyes still on the page. You didn't tell anyone about it? I shook my head. Forgot about it myself until they started locking me out. He chuckled. They walked into this one bare-assed. I wasn't interested in courtroom drama. I didn't want headlines or Twitter mobs or a LinkedIn sob story. This wasn't about taking Declan down. I wasn't 15 anymore, out for blood over being dumped before homecoming. This was about balance. Correction. A quiet hand reaching back into the ledger and crossing out the lie. We spent the next hour drafting the formal reversion notice, clean, dry, and terrifyingly clear. Miles called it a polite kill switch. I called it long overdue. No demands, no accusations, just a legal notification that, as of the date of my termination, all proprietary frameworks, code libraries, licensing logic, and underlying automation systems I authored had reverted to my sole ownership. That included the very engine the company used to validate its client-side dashboards. Miles emailed it directly to their general counsel with a red receipt and a brief cover letter. Then he shut his laptop with a snap and took a long drag from his lukewarm coffee. They're gonna think it's a bluff, he said. Good, I replied. Let them. He grinned. You always did like letting people underestimate you. I paid the check, left a generous tip. As I stepped out into the cold afternoon air, a quiet satisfaction settled in. Not the smug, vengeful kind, but the type that comes when the weight shifts just slightly back toward fairness. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. I just took back what was already mine. The first crack didn't come with a bang. It came with a calendar reschedule. A Tuesday morning call with one of our longest-standing clients, a major logistics firm with a risk appetite smaller than a nun's shot glass. They'd been using our proprietary risk dashboard for 5 years without issue. Until that morning, when their VP of compliance called and calmly said, "Your platform is rejecting our license key. Says it's invalid." At first, the support team figured it was a billing hiccup, maybe a delayed renewal flag. But 5 minutes later, a second client emailed. Then a third. By noon, the help desk queue looked like a slot machine that wouldn't stop bleeding. Declan hadn't even finished his morning smoothie before his Slack was blowing up. Red messages, panic pings, one poor junior dev tagging him directly in the incident channel with, "At Declan, do you want to escalate this to Tier 2? He responded with a shrug emoji. By 12:30, the API logs started throwing authentication errors. Every product instance built on the core licensing engine was throwing timeouts or bouncing users back with access token rejected. Clients were locked out mid-session. Dashboards went blank. Internal demos collapsed live in front of potential investors. One client reported that their auditors walked out of the room mid-review. Declan burst into the war room like a man who just realized the grenade he pulled the pin on was still in his hand. "Get engineering on it now," he barked. "It's a bug in the legacy chain." There it was again. Legacy. The engineers scrambled. Patching, testing, rolling back. But every time they tried to reroute or force off a license call, it failed. Hard. Declan started pacing, spitballing theories like he was on some kind of startup true crime podcast. Maybe it's an expired certificate? Or someone hard-coded an old domain call. Come on, guys, think. But engineering had already run through the logs. The systems weren't breaking. They were rejecting. Who built the license validator again? One of the senior devs asked, staring at the audit trail with squinted eyes. Silence. Another engineer chimed in. Wasn't that originally, her code? My name floated into the room like smoke. No one wanted to say it out loud, but the repo history was clear. Half the validator logic still bore my initials in the commit notes. And the few sections that weren't mine, they were wrapped in dependency calls to encrypted libraries. Libraries that hadn't been touched in years. "Okay, but we own it," Declan said, voice rising now. "She worked here. It was all done under contract." The engineers didn't argue, but they didn't nod either. Then legal walked in. The general counsel, a sharp-eyed woman who rarely left her corner of the floor unless someone was about to get fired or sued. She looked around the room, holding a printed email in one hand and my employment agreement in the other. Her mouth was a tight line. "Declan," she said flatly, "we need to talk. In private." He looked confused. Defensive. About what? She raised the agreement. Clause 10.7. You didn't run this by legal before terminating her. He blinked. It's a legacy contract. I thought it was boilerplate. No, she said, cutting him off. It's not. Outside the war room, the incident dashboard was blinking red across 5 time zones. Inside, the room was silent. Not because they didn't know what to do, but because they just realized who they should have listened to before this all began. The boardroom smelled like cold coffee and desperation. 12 people in tailored suits sat hunched around a glass table designed for press photos, not crisis containment. Half of them were dialing lawyers, the other half trying to remember if they ever read the fine print on the CTO's hiring memo. Declan sat at the far end, arms crossed, cheeks blotched with the red flush of someone who just realized his TED Talk charisma wasn't covered by indemnity insurance. General counsel stood at the front, not pacing, just holding still, like if she moved too fast the whole company might fall through the floor. In her hand, my contract. Pages flagged, annotated, highlighted like a crime scene. I'll keep this brief, she said, voice crisp. Clause 10.7b establishes that all intellectual property created by the employee reverts to her ownership if she is terminated without 90 days' notice. One board member, an older man with a diamond pinky ring and the permanent scowl of someone who's been through 2 divorces and 1 federal audit, leaned forward. You mean some of the IP, right? She shook her head once. All original software, which includes the architecture for our licensing system, the risk automation framework, and the client authentication layers. It's been validated. Another member whispered, "My God!" Declan, still half-slouched in his chair, tried to salvage his smirk. "Okay, look, we're rebuilding from scratch anyway. We were going to move off the old system. This just accelerates the timeline." No one replied, because at that moment, PR buzzed in to report that 2 clients had issued formal SLA violation notices. 3 more were demanding emergency reviews. And 1, our biggest enterprise account, had scheduled a call with their legal team for end-of-week clarity or cancellation. The CFO leaned over to Declan, whispering something about liability caps and force majeure. Declan waved him off. Then legal's phone buzzed again. She checked it, then looked up slowly. Her attorney just sent over a document. Declan scoffed. "Let me guess. A cease and desist?" "No," she replied. "An invoice." That word landed harder than any threat could have. She continued, reading from the screen. Line item breakdown, license reversion fee, source code retrieval charges, system interruption penalties, and ongoing usage without authorization. Total, low 7 figures. A beat passed, then another. "No threats, no lawsuit," she said. "Just a bill. And by all appearances, a very well-documented one." Declan shifted in his seat. His mouth opened to argue, but nothing came out. "I wasn't in that room. Didn't need to be. I was at home, sitting in a worn armchair by the window, sipping black tea and watching the wind wrestle with the maple outside. My inbox had already pinged with a CC from Miles. Subject line, invoice delivered. No drama, no commentary, just action. Because this wasn't revenge. It wasn't war. It was accounting. They thought they were building an empire on their own terms, but they built it on mine. And now the lease had expired. I waited until 9:57 a.m. Not because it was symbolic, just because the Series C demo was scheduled for 10 sharp, and I didn't want to cut the music before the first violin string got pulled. Precision mattered. That was always the difference between what I built and what Declan thought he could replicate by sheer willpower and whiteboard fumes. 3 minutes before showtime, I logged in from my home terminal. Quiet interface. 2-factor confirmed. No alarms, no flashing lights, just a dashboard I hadn't touched since the day before my badge deactivated. I scrolled past the access logs, opened the API token management panel, and toggled 4 cloud-linked keys from active to revoked. Then I logged out. No firewall breach, no code injection, no malicious script, just a clean disconnection. An execution of rights restored under Clause 10.7b. Legal had already confirmed the clock started ticking the moment they kicked me out without notice. Now it was just cleanup. 10 minutes later, the text started. First from a former dev lead. "Did you do something? Dashboards are crashing across the board." Then from Miles, "They're mid-demo. Investors watching a loading screen." And finally, one from someone I hadn't heard from in 6 months. A senior sales director who once told me I was too introverted to lead product strategy. His message read simply, "Please call me. This is bad." At exactly 10:14, my logging bot, still running silently on an offsite monitor node, confirmed 213 unauthorized attempts to access my code libraries. All failed. The IPs matched the investor demo sandbox. By 10:22, the sandbox itself went dark. They'd built everything, sales pitches, client dashboards, investor confidence, on architecture they no longer had the right to use. And the moment that architecture closed its gates, the illusion fell apart. Back in the boardroom, Declan was sweating through his designer polo, blaming technical sabotage with the tone of a man trying to redefine oxygen. He pointed fingers, demanded someone roll back the changes, and even accused the engineers of planting a time bomb in the code. Legal stepped in again. "No sabotage," the general counsel said, dropping a printed copy of my invoice beside a stunned investor. Clause 10.7 was triggered. She's simply enforcing her rights. She can't just shut us out. Declan barked. "She can," Legal replied. "And she has." He tried to spin it, said they'd already planned to pivot to a new platform, that the disruption was just part of transition. But the investors weren't biting. They weren't there for vision. They were there to see a functioning product. And instead, they saw a broken window looking into an empty room. Back at home, I didn't crack champagne. I didn't smile. I didn't text anyone gloating memes. I just opened the logs, exported the access attempt report, and filed it in my legal archive. Then I wrote a single email. Subject: confirmation of lockout execution, timestamped and logged, to Declan Legal Board CC. One sentence in the body. As per clause 10.7b, system access has been revoked due to unauthorized continued use post-termination. No threats. No threats needed. Because silence speaks volumes when the room used to echo with certainty, and now echoes with nothing at all. The call came from a number I hadn't saved, but recognized immediately, an area code that screamed boardroom, not bullpen. I let it ring twice before answering. No hello, no pleasantries. Just my name and a pause. Ms. Caldwell, thank you for picking up. The board would like to talk. Of course they would. The next voice was deeper, calmer. One of the finance chairs, I think. Never bothered learning names beyond the ones who showed up to system demos and asked intelligent questions, which meant this guy was a ghost until now. We'd like to resolve this amicably, he said. No lawyers. No threats. Just the tone of someone who'd seen the projected churn numbers and finally realized what it meant when you rip out your spinal cord and try to walk upright. I'm listening, I said. We recognize that the current situation has caused unnecessary disruption to client operations. Our hope is to find a solution that reflects your contributions without escalating this into something that compromises future partnerships. Translation: the investors are breathing down our necks, and Declan's about to be thrown under the bus so hard he'll get tire marks on his resume. I didn't ask for blood. I didn't need it. That was never the goal. I want fair value, I said. Not a cent more. Not a cent less. They asked for a figure. I gave them one. 7 digits. The kind that makes the room go still before someone clears their throat. And I added a public acknowledgement of authorship. Correction. Quiet, internal, I don't care. But I want it stated. My name. On the record. A beat. Then, done. The paperwork arrived the next morning via secure courier. No fanfare. No notary handshake. Just a manila envelope, 3 signatures, and a line item transfer that would hit my account in 3 to 5 business days. The general counsel's note was handwritten. Short, polite, and devoid of apology. Just the way I liked it. As for Declan, he was transitioned within the week. Official memo said he'd be refocusing on innovation outside the organization, which is Silicon Valley for fired, but still invited to brunch. They held a farewell Zoom call. Someone made a Canvas slide. I didn't attend. No need. Instead, I signed the release forms, sipped my coffee, and watched the internal bulletin from a distance. No parting shots. No victory laps. Just silence and closure. Because winning doesn't always look like a headline. Sometimes it looks like a cleared inbox and a line on your bank statement that finally matches the hours you put in. Sometimes it sounds like nothing at all. The new office was quiet. Not sterile, just simple. White walls, hardwood floors, a view of the street where nobody knew my name. No receptionist. No framed awards. Just a dry erase board half filled with modular sketches and marker smudges, and a standing desk pushed against the far wall. My laptop hummed quietly. A jasmine-scented candle flickered in the corner, mostly for the illusion of calm, not enlightenment. I was sketching out a new sandbox model, leaner, lighter, fully containerized. No dependencies, no legacy to maintain. Every line of logic was mine. No approvals needed. No budget meetings or ego tantrums. Just clean architecture and a clearer conscience. At 10:17 a.m., the doorbell rang. Outside sat a small brown box, no return label. Inside, a company-branded mug. My old company. The same one that had once listed me on the org chart under Other. The mug had a tiny chip in the handle, probably from warehouse storage, and next to it a generic apology card. White, serif font. No one signed it. I laughed. Not loud. just enough to shake my shoulders. I set both on the shelf next to the coffee machine. Let the mug live there, chipped and quiet, like an artifact from a dig site everyone stopped funding too early. When I turned back to my desk, my inbox had a new message. Subject line: new build proposal. We'd like to license your platform. No emojis. No, hope you've been well. Just a direct ask. Professional. Polite. Hungry. They'd come full circle. I didn't open it right away. Just sat down and stared at it for a moment, hands folded, the way you do when you already know how something ends but still want to taste the silence around it. They thought firing me gave them control. All they did was remind me who really built it. They laughed when I left. But I took the keys with me.